Hey everyone, Jim Clare here. I'm here with a new feature, a new series. Well, it's the first video of it. I'm just new to YouTube here, but I'm doing the read-along series. So the short of it, what that is where I will take a passage from a book or multiple passages from a book is what I have today. And in the future, it'll be fiction or nonfiction, and I will riff on it. I will be my musings, my observations, something where I believe it speaks to current culture, or perhaps some writing techniques I'm noticing and what makes the book stand out, what makes the story stand out, what makes the history stand out. And I'm not scripting these. These aren't drawn out. I'm riffing live with you here with this video. And today I have a very special book. It's a book I'm currently reading. I'm not yet finished with it. I'll probably do a few more read-along videos from it. It's flooring me. Before I get into it, if you like what you're seeing here, and I hope you do, go ahead and like and subscribe to this channel. It's brand new, it's growing. If you really like what you see, go to my jimclair.com. It's hosted by Substack. Go ahead and subscribe. Become a paying member if you'd like. I have a book club that's starting. I'll get into that a little bit at the end of this video. But let's get right to it. So the book I'm reading that is flooring me is Natural Law and Human Rights by Pierre Manent. I hope I'm getting that French pronunciation right, so I'm probably butchering it. So if I am butchering it, forgive me. My French extends to about parlez-vous français, and that's about it. And so Pierre Manent, a little bit of background on him. He is a conservative French intellectual. I guess you could also call him a Catholic intellectual as well. And he's a political philosopher. I'm only newly familiar with him. I'm familiar with him through the Claremont Review of Books. Was it one or two of his essays? I really knocked me out. And I'm more familiar with him through Daniel J. Mahoney, who is an excellent political philosopher and thinker in his own right. And I read his new book, I have it here behind me probably somewhere. Is it The Persistence of the Ideological Lie? And it's a fantastic book. And in it, he mentions Pierre Manent a lot. And so I decided to read this book, and I've been floored by it. It is probably the most significant political work I've read since Conflict of Visions by Thomas Sowell, which is one of Thomas Sowell's most famous works. It discussed the worldview of the constrained and the unconstrained, it's not a general one-size-fits-all theory, but it is Sowell's depiction or articulation of why people hold certain political beliefs. No one is one side more than the other. And that book forever sharpened my colors of the world and also made me understand my own political leanings on the right. And Natural Law and Human Rights is having the same effect. It's also, I believe it has given me the final push to return me back to Catholicism. That's probably a video for another day. So today I'm going to read you a few passages on this, and I'm going to go off of the title of this video was a bit clickbait. But I've been giving a lot of thought to this. So as I was reading this book, the U.S. men's hockey team won the gold medal. And I noticed as you probably have noticed too, about the journalists on the particular sides, like the Atlantic, the New York Times, mainstream media, has really denigrated the U.S. men's hockey team. They were shocked that they accepted Trump's invitation to the White House. Not political journalists, but journalists were asking them and pressing them with questions, trying to apologize that 2020, reflect and apologize that they did after they won the gold medal. They thought the jokes that went on in the locker room between Trump and them was offensive. And if you were on Twitter or X, the certain liberal corners and certain basically Karens were going completely ballistic on what happened with the U.S. men's hockey team. There was these posts about how, I'm a mother and I can't believe how this would affect me if I took my son to all these hockey practices. And then he goes on, wins the gold medal and makes a joke with Trump. It's a sad state of affairs. It's this Puritanism that is going on. And we see it in a lot of other different parts of our culture. This sort of, you must obey, or you must fall in line with these particular beliefs. And I've always wondered, where does this come from, right? You get a lot of psychoanalysis or armchair psychoanalysis of these people are jealous or these people are angry at something, right? And I'm never satisfied with those explanations. I think they're kind of tropish, to be honest with you. They don't really explain anything. They just kind of do a sense of, I'm higher than thou, and these people are lying to themselves. But the journalists asking the questions to the U.S. men's hockey team, the people going up online and doing this, they believe that they are in the right? They believe that they have the moral superiority. So where are they coming from, right? And it's very much a liberal, it's an imbued in the liberal worldview, right? It's this, you have to fall in line. And now we see that the U.S. men's hockey and the beliefs of the U.S. men's hockey team, according to a large proportion or a large population of liberals, must be an organ for their political beliefs. There was a post on X that went viral about some Substack guy who has like 12 subscribers about how he feels like such a victim. He's he's part of the LGBTQI plus, whatever the alphabet is there. And he has this long post of how offensive this was and how he can't, how brutal this was and how violent this was. It was this long rant about the U.S. men's hockey team winning. And then there has been podcasters from Canada, crudely telling them, how can Brady to Chuck, or I might have the wrong to Chuck there, shake the hand of the president. And so it's, as I was reading this book, there were certain passages that spoke to me. And the same thing also spoke to me as well about pronouns. And I'll get into this a bit about through the book here as we go through it, and why that has now become a standard on forums. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately since my daughter has been born. But when we're going through the hospital and finding pediatricians, all of the forms that you filled out, it put you to this progressive ideology. It put you to that you have to put pronouns, you have to put sexual choice for an infant. And there is no ways around it if you're signing the form unless you're opting out. And I'll get into a little bit, but for instance, my daughter's pediatrician's office, on the online form, it has these, what is her preferred, what is her chosen sexuality? She's a baby girl, but there's all these, pansexual, all these crazy things. And it's for an infant girl, but you have to fill it out. You can't really fill out anything else other than this. And if you, in public, I notice I'm sure you have also noticed, if you try to denounce this or say that it is nonsense, then you are being political, it's a accusation, right? You are being political. And it is a defensive mechanism, or is an attack mechanism, that your views of questioning about how does my infant daughter who can't speak yet, how does she identify? If I question the philosophy, the meaning behind this question for a baby girl, that somehow I am being political, right? That the whole form itself isn't political. So I've given a lot of thought to that, and I've long lived in Colorado. I did move for a year up in Boise, but unfortunately it was too far from family, so we moved back to Colorado. I'm originally from Boston, so traveling out east from Boise, Idaho was tough. But Colorado is, especially in the Denver areas, are imbued with progressive beliefs. So you run into these concepts every day. So I have long given thought to this, but I want to dive in here. And the U.S. men's hockey team really gave me thought to this, and also the pronouns. So I'm going to read a few passages from Natural Law and Human Rights, and then I'll provide some context on what he's talking about, a little bit of background on the book. But the first part I'm going to read here is about the moralizing cause that Pierre Manent goes through. So page 44, here we go. How do you do? All right. Hobbes, this is Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher. Hobbes accomplished this task by removing fear from all dependency in relation to natural law, however this law might be conceived. Far from leaving the effect of fear under a rule that would guide the way in which this effect must be mastered, and that might require, for example, that the city inculcate inculcate virtues such as courage in its citizens. He puts fear in the position of a cause, of a moral or rather moralizing cause. It is the affect itself, the passion of fear, that is the spring or the pivot of what Hobbes again calls the natural law, a natural law that is not properly a law, but rather, as Hobbes readily admits, a conclusion or a theorem derived from the human fear of death. How then does he proceed? As I said, he gives fear a moral function and even a moral mission. He brings out the moralizing potential of this effect. All right, to give a bit of background. So, in a far too reductive summary, Pierre Manent's titled Natural Law and Human Rights. So, Pierre says that the natural law is, in a sense, it's steeped in faith, and for him, it's steeped in this Catholic faith. But natural law is this innate sense of laws that we have. To reduce this to, if you see a boy walking a puppy, and then you see a man run up and stomp the puppy's head, you know there's an intuition that we have that is evil, right? That is awful, right? And that is sort of, in a reductive sense, what the natural law is. And this natural law expands out to almost all elements of our lives. For instance, like what you wear to a fancy steakhouse, you have this innate sense that you need to dress up and hold a sense of decorum. And this natural law imbues itself into institutions, because all humans humans touch institutions and create institutions and grow institutions. So the natural law is going to go into those institutions. And it is what humans should do, right? And a good moral order, a good political systems upholds this natural law. And I believe he calls it here in the practical law that, this kind of common sense thing, right? You don't rob your neighbor's house. You don't, vandalize, right? We have a sense that this is destructive, that this destroys elements. You also have to have particular laws that protect people against violence from others, right? These common sense laws that even in a sense, if you're stuck on an island with 20 other people, these laws kind of form. Humans have a tendency, right? These laws can form in a good way, or these laws can form in a bad way, and that depends on power dynamics and everything like that. But that's a video for another day. But the natural law is is that sort of innate sense that we have, right? That God has given us this innate sense of laws of good and evil, what we should do, a sense of manner and decorum. And the should is how we should behave, or what should happen, how we should act in particular situation. And laws enable these particular and protect these particular intuitions, this innate sense, and that makes for a thriving society. And human rights here is more that rights are created, right? Like that women have a right to abortion, or that abortion is health care, and that is a human right. But a right presupposes that it was that it was somehow before society, right? It goes all the way back to Rousseau for Pierre Manent, excuse me, I'm going to butcher the French, so we'll just call him Pierre. That somehow this right presupposes it. But in reality, this right is created. And a lot of these rights are created wholesale. And a lot of the LGBTQI, transgender rights, all of these rights are incredibly new, especially in the last 20 years, especially probably more so in the last 7 years or so. They did not just, they just kind of appeared out of nowhere. They weren't in, in 1700 England, they weren't there, right? So there was really no society where these rights existed. So rights are a theoretical construct, even though the other side calls the natural laws theoretical constructs. But, so this moralizing cause, what he's getting at here is, at first, prior to this, he goes into Machiavelli. And what Machiavelli did was he denied this natural law in the sense that Machiavelli, or Pierre, says that there's a gap. And the gap is what humans do, so how we act, how we behave, and what humans should do, right? And that should do is a sense of morals. And Machiavelli said we never meet the should, we should only focus on what humans do. And that is this discard of that gap. Machiavelli then went on to propose that fear is what creates a sense of control in the state. and that if you make people fear this, then that's going to sense control. But the problem is with that is fear can create chaos, right? A society does not really run very well off of fear. So Hobbes takes this notion and then goes into the moralizing cause, right? You can create this sense of fear. You can use fear as a tool, but you use it it's better to use it as a moralizing cause, right? That if you're on the you're on the side of evil, right? We hear this accusation all the time, leveraged at Trump, that he's Nazis and every one of his followers are a bunch of Nazis, right? And they are on the wrong side of history. There is this moralizing sense that is leveraged there. So it is a moralizing cause, right? Or that if women don't have access to abortion, or they aren't getting abortions left and right, that they're going to be dying by the thousands, right? Is this moralizing cause. Now, not all moralizing causes are that awful, right? But it is a very dangerous tool. It's a very powerful tool, and that's what he's getting into here. So before we get into it, this moralizing cause, right, is imbued in the worldview of the journalists asking, or the people going online complaining about the U.S. men's hockey team. The journalists, sorry, I cut myself off there. The journalists asking the U.S. men's hockey team. There is this moralizing cause. It is part of their worldview that other people need to fall in line with this. And that is, you must decry Trump. And a lot of it is you must decry America. And because there was a lot of people freaking out that, I think Jack Hughes said he's proud to be American. That is awful. It's white privilege. It's racist. It's terrible. What an awful son, that he loves America, right? So these sort of notions were out there. So that is because on the other side, Jack Hughes, his whole narrative, or what he said, or not narrative, is against the moralizing cause, right? He's not falling in line to the moralizing cause. So onwards we go. And why do people, for this moralizing cause, put into, I guess you could say, more effect? All right, here we go. I'm going to take a sip of coffee here. All right, here we go. Moreover, while Hobbes takes account only of the motives of those who obey, he attributes to them only those that fit. Since those who obey are constrained and dominated by fear, their motives are reduced to the desire to persevere in being in the most comfortable way possible. Then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This world is supposed to find its limits and be held together by the polarity between those who obey because they cannot, so to speak, do anything, and those who command because they can, so to speak, do anything. All right, so let's go back to this first part here. Since those who obey are constrained and dominated by fear, their motives are reduced to the desire to persevere in being in the most comfortable way possible. Here, Pierre is laying out what he calls command and obey. That human action, we all have choice. We are determined in this, or we can understand people by their choices or their actions. And we all have this agency of our command center, right? How we command, or commanding others, but it's really, we can look at it as agency, this command of how we act. And obey, to Pierre, is still an action, right? That we obey the laws, but there's an action to obey those laws. But here he's showing the Hobbesian version of this command and obey, in the version of the command and obey for the progressive posture, right? Because Hobbes is wielding this moralizing cause, this sense of fear, or what he's talking about, the sovereign state, or the state is wielding fear, but it's a moralizing cause. So those who obey are constrained and dominated by fear. Their motives are reduced to the desire to persevere in being in the most comfortable way possible. So you could say that virtue signaling is a big part of this fear. So, around 2020, and we're seeing it a bit now, when someone steps up and apologizes, I'm sorry for being white because XYZ happened. Or if you go on Instagram, you see, especially, you'll see in the comments, or you see in stories, someone will take a meme of how Iran war would never have occurred, and the matriarchy of what's going on in Iran would never have occurred in the matriarchy. I apologize for this, Y, the Z. So this is a virtue signal in a sense that is shown these people are acting from a sense of fear. Now, they don't believe they are acting from a sense of fear, right? Pierre gets into this later that they believe they are commanding, but they're unsure if they're obeying. It's this vicious sort of cycle that is going on here. And I'm not going to try to get into the psychoanalysis of these people, but there's the sense of I need to post this apology that I apologize for X, Y, Z, because I fear that if I don't, I'm going to be ostracized by those with my worldview, or I'm going to fall out of favor, right? So I want to be comfortable. So I need to show that I am part of what the progressive posture is. So I'm going to stand up and show my moral superiority, and the person thinks they are commanding or obeying. So it is very much this falling in line, and it's this homogenized command and obey. It's this, right? The journalists who a long time ago are in universities, journalism, instead of reporting the facts, started becoming more activism. So these journalists are pressuring the U.S. men's hockey team and specific individuals on the hockey team to apologize, to reflect, to denounce, to grovel, to look bad, right? They're trying to immediately position the person's views or try to get them on their side or try to get them to obey because their worldviews or what they expressed, right? I'm proud to be an American, is disobedient to the state or to this ideology. And so they're reduced and dominated by fear in this sense, right? So they don't know what to do in this particular situation. So I'm going to go on here. It's a sense of obedience. Let's see here. This world is supposed to find its limits, or I read this, but this world is supposed to find its limits and be held together by the polarity between those who obey because they cannot, so to speak, do anything, and those who command because they can, so to speak, do anything, right? So there's this, Hobbes is taking the polarity of obey and a command, right? Who is commanding and who is obeying. But again, as I said, there's a cycle here. Now, I don't want to repeat too much, so you kind of get this idea. Or at least I hope you do. All right, so let me go on. So here is the science of obedience. Let me see here. How then, or this is the science of obedience, or what Hobbes is, or he lays this out before. How then are we to make people obey who are essentially recalcitrant, people who find themselves in no reason to obey? This is to ask at the same time how to produce the power capable of making them obey and how to make this obedience just or legitimate. That is equal. So the equal element he's talking about here, I believe, if I'm going on the context of the book, is equality, right? That the belief that any sort of disparity shows injustices of that particular worldview. So there has to be equality, right? Equality of the sexes, equality of the races. There can be no winners. That everyone has to be the same, and it has to be forced upon us, right? So in here, this obedience is, the science of obedience is, Hobbes puts forth that you have to make these people who are disobedient, such as the men's hockey team in this case, how do we make them obey? There is no reason for the men's hockey team to be spouting their politics. They played a game. They were patriots for their country. It was a remarkable game. It's a first gold medal in 46 years. It was a remarkable moment. It was a wonderful win. And so now these journalists and everyone else is trying to demand that they obey. And, there's headlines, how they captured the moment, then lost the moment, how terrible it was, right? So there's no reason here for any of them to obey to this. It doesn't mean they need to fight the system against it, but why is there a reason to obey this? And for a lot of people, why is there a reason to obey this, right? And this is this question of these journalists they are now confronted with this reality that someone that is supposed to be an organ, or what they believe is supposed to be an organ of their political beliefs, is not obeying. So I go on. The state is in fact charged with bringing together power and justice, irresistible power and equal justice. But what remains indeterminate is the morality proper to the state. That is, the intention or the disposition by which it beats down the pride or represses the disobedience of subjects or of citizens. All right, so before I go on, so beats down the pride or the morality proper to the state. Here, the morality proper is the progressive posture, right? That you were supposed to, these U.S. men's hockey team was supposed to deny, we're supposed to say, I'm sorry for Trump, right? They're supposed to show the proper morality, the proper opinions, the proper beliefs of the state. You can also, in a sense, see this, to go off on this a little bit, that when Eileen Liu, the women's figure skater who won the gold medal in figure skating, she in the past, seems to have been forced to play her hand and express, political opinions, and you could call them left-leaning, but still conservatives and MAGA online were all celebrating her win, or most of them are celebrating her win. They're still fringe idiots. But they were celebrating her win, and there's a lot of personalities on the left who are upset at this, from congressmen to big-time personalities where, well, she expressed these opinions. How can you, she hates you, right? So how can you hail her for winning the gold medal? Which really reveals a lot of the progressive worldview, that you have to fall in line. And because we're Republicans or MAGA or conservatives or whatever have you, were praising the win of Eileen winning the gold medal, that somehow, because her views were different, that's not right, that is wrong, that we're supposed to be denigrating her, or I'm not ashamed to admit I'm a Trump voter, like I'm supposed to be denigrating her. It was amazing. Her routine was amazing, and it's amazing she won the gold medal. Politics aside, I don't care about that. Just like, Robert De Niro's politics are crazy to me, but as an actor, he's been in some phenomenal roles in some wonderful movies, right? He's a great actor. So, I hail his acting ability and I respect his acting ability, but I disagree with his politics. But we see a certain faction who believes that you have to be pure all the way through. And that's what he's talking about here. So here, it goes down, beats down the pride or represses the disobedience of its subjects or citizens. So we are seeing this currently with the U.S. men's hockey team, or a little bit, how journalists keep hammering and demanding an apology, and demanding, and local journalists in particular areas are hitting and want an apology, right? This is awful, right? The headlines in certain magazines, as I said, or certain newspapers, are they lost the moment, right? So they're hammering how they've just fallen out of touch, or we can't celebrate this win because they didn't fall in line with our particular views. And we see this in other elements, right? When you go in on like the medical forms that I mentioned earlier, the pediatrician's forms, that you're supposed to fall in line, right? Like I have to put, for myself or for my daughter, they or they's, or he, him, he, her, right? I have to put in this insulting nonsense that removes my agency. I have to put this in, and they tend to leave you no choice, right? So that's what's this morality of the state here, right? They have to beat down the pride. And we see this in schools, we see this with curriculums, we see this in a lot of other elements, and we see this in individual actions. All right, so I'm going to go on with this passage. This is still the same passage here. If we are condemned to ignorance concerning this intention, if it remains necessarily indeterminate, this is because the state draws its motivation, or rather its raison d'etre, and its basis from the perspective of those who obey, not those who command. Those for whom obedience is essentially repugnant conceive and produce the instrument that will force them irresistibly to obey. The instrument that makes them obey in order to then obey them. Thus, this immense apparatus, this Martellus infinitus, hope that pronunciation is correct, does not know whether it is obeying or commanding, and the people who make use of it do not know either. This indeterminacy that combines opacity and duplicity indicates, more than any other characteristic, the vice of the modern state, the weakness that is intrinsic to its construction, and the underside of its immense power. Okay, so indeterminacy. As I said earlier, how rights are constructed, Pierre says that they are indeterminate, right? That they are meaningless in a sense. So it is this theoretical construction. So idea of systemic racism is a theoretical construction, right? That somehow whiteness is a disease. This is a theoretical construction, and it is indeterminate, right? It is an indeterminate means essentially it's theoretically construction, is no empirical observation of it. It totally avoids natural law, right? And it's meaningless. And also part of this indeterminacy, it is ephemeral. For instance, in 2007, we were never concerned with these elements, right? We were never concerned about this sort of really your systemic racism outside of maybe the small factors of bell hooks, who was a big proponent of this, and I think it was in the 90s, right? So outside of small academic circles, or you could even say, if you look at, say, how a lot of colleges now teach Homer, right? That Achilles is transsexual, or he's gay, or he's white privilege, or he's this, or all of these particular constructs that they now abuse Achilles for. And Madeline Miller, the author, is probably one of the worst abusers of this, how she presents the story. It is utter nonsense. And I've read both of the books. I mean, she can write a good story. That's what makes her so influential. But it's just, in the end, it's complete nonsense, right? But it is fashionable, as in it's ephemeral. We never had this in the 80s. We never had this in the 70s. What was power, was a concept in the 70s disappeared. What was a concept in the 90s has gone away, right? So it is an indeterminate. Right? In 10 years, there's going to be a whole new slew of rights that certain groups are going to be a part of and demand that we don't know of right now, right? And then in 10 years after that set of rights, those rights are going to be out of fashion or deemed bad, and there's going to be a whole new set of rights. So that's what he's referring to here. So that's indeterminacy. So the does not know whether it is obeying or commanding. So this is the part of the theory that's interesting, or not theory, that the argument that Pierre puts out that is interesting is that the command and obey center, the person who is, the barista, for instance, if you go in and get a coffee and the barista, asks for your pronouns, he doesn't really know whether he is commanding or obeying. He thinks probably he is showing this moral superiority, that he's part of the in crowd, that he's part of the right side of history. But is he obeying the ideology by doing this so he does not get, quote unquote, canceled? Or does he think that he is commanding? Now he is choosing this. Pierre puts this in there that, that these, progressives will choose their politicians. They vote to choose this, or they choose to pick this particular ideology in a sense. So they put this out there, but this ideology acts as kind of this amorphous blob where it's good for Hobbes that there is, not for Hobbes, he puts later for the modern state, that there is intense activity for this, right? So there's intense activity for pronouns, there's intense activity for this, but then the state somewhat dissipates. And what that means by the state dissipates, it doesn't mean government dissipates. It means it just becomes imbued, right? Everything is homogenized, everything becomes equality. And people need to be obeying this, right? This desire for this kind of a one-party state you could offer, or this demand that the U.S. men's hockey team fall in line with particular worldviews, and they must be an organ for these particular worldviews. So the people who are doing this, like, let's go back to the barista, he doesn't know whether he's commanding or obeying. It's this cycle. So he does it out of obeying, which is an action. He chooses to do it, and he thinks but he might think that he's commanding, right? And if I walked in there with a MAGA hat, he might refuse me. He might say something to me. He might write something nasty on my coffee mug. He might do something of that nature, or he might demand that I do my pronouns. So he doesn't sure if I'm commanding, obeying, and if I'm disobedient, it conflicts with his worldview, and then I'm everything that he thinks is evil. So pretty fascinating stuff. All right, here we go. And I'll go a little bit further here. In the moral penumbra of the state, the citizen unlearns what it is to obey, and even more what it is to command. He unlearns together the two modalities of human action, particularly the main modality, that of commanding. The dominance of the state is the cause of an ongoing withering of human action and at the same time inseparably of the growing obscurity of understanding of action. So this part here is the unlearning the modalities of human action. It goes real deep. It goes into this concept of free will. As I said earlier, that we are a product of our choices. You can only understand someone by what they choose or how they act, right? But here it's Jack Hughes saying, I'm proud to be an American, is against the commanding action of you're supposed to be denigrating America, right? He's supposed to get up there and say, I apologize for America's stance on ICE or immigration, right? He's supposed to be getting up there and denigrating America. So he's supposed to be removing this action. So you could say online, you get this concept of, you see this meme going around that the left, right? And it's attacked at the right too, that they download the particular talking points. But it is a sense, right? They download progressive talking points in order to take a particular position. And here is what that is, right? So the person doesn't know, the state in a sense, the person doesn't know who is commanding and obeying, right? It is the modality. So the person's agency then aligns with this ideology. They must be acting in line with these particular worldviews, and becomes imbued in their nature. And it's, we can psychoanalyze it all you want. You can take psychological guesses, but it is imbued in their nature. Everyone must fall in line with this, or they're triggered, or they're upset, or they're evil, right? The Christians are pro-life, that is evil and oppressive to women and stifling and all of these things, and Nazis and fascists and all of these accusations and all the other adjectives that you can throw out there. It is, the person, in a sense, what Pierre is arguing here, before they act, right, or before they make a decision, oftentimes or almost all of the time, they have to put it in line with this particular worldview, that it has to be in line with this worldview, especially in any sort of public area, that it has to fall in line in its who is commanding and who is obeying. Are they following this particular set of worldviews and the frameworks of it? Are they choosing to follow in that moment, right? It's that cycle that I mentioned earlier. It is, it's pretty fascinating. So I'm going to go on here, finish the last passage here. All right. Whatever he who commands me by the instrument of the state may do, I must acknowledge his actions as my own, since I authorize him to do what he would judge best to do as sovereign. So that kind of goes back to what I just said there, that he's acknowledging that the person chooses this ideology, right? So you could say that's the sovereign. He elects it in particular ways. He chooses it to follow, say, certain personalities like Rachel Maddow. And, but then the same modalities, the same principles, the same rules, the same rights, they have to follow these. And before they act, they wonder if they have to do this. So we see this with something like pronouns. And I'll get into this a little bit as I mentioned about my daughter's, hospitals and pediatricians, that they, is she pansexual? What is her chosen identity? What is her preferred language? And they list 1 million languages. I saw Scottish Gaelic. I wish I chose Scottish Gaelic, but I just decided not to do the online form. But David Mamet has this element called language, or he mentions this argument called the left plays a language game. And we see that with politically correct terms. So we see that with homeless people, right? We can call them, they went from vagrants to homeless to now the unhoused, right? And we see that in all types of politically correct terms, right? For the instance, you could call I didn't think a joke was that ribald about what Donald Trump did. It's a pretty basic thing, but there isn't supposed to be this psychological difference between men and women in this element, or this differences of nature between the two. And there are a difference in nature between, a female's nature is different than a male nature, just as the psychology is different in both sides, right? You could say there's things that resemble each other, but in the end, men and women are different from biologically to metaphysical differences. So this language game is, right, you're not, like birth givers. That was also on the medical forms. Are you a birth giver, or a chest feeder? All of these ridiculous forms, which is just totally reduce agency. But it gives you no choice, right? When you look at these forms, you don't have any other choice. So it is a language game in the sense that you have to fall in line. So if you believe, right, that a woman is just now a birth giver or a chest feeder, that means if you believe that, then you believe anything. That's what David Mamet proposes. And that's what's going on here, right? They keep moving these needles that you have to believe this. You have to believe this particular right. And you have to fall in line, right? So, I got a nasty looking summer in Denver when I call the homeless vagrants, right? I'm not calling them unhoused, homeless is fine, or vagrants, but that's what they are. But me saying that, I'm not falling into the particular language game, but I get, nasty looks for saying that because it isn't falling in line with this particular language game. And no, I don't believe trans women are women, they're men. And so, but if I believe that a man is a woman, then I'll believe anything. And that's part of the language game. And you see that on forms. And you see that with this pronoun element, right? That you have to put in he, him, on your resume, your LinkedIn, or on a dentist form, that you have to put she, her, or she, they. So it is a particular language game in the, online. If you look at those drop-down menus, those are the only choices you have. You can't put anything else. Right, so the language game here is forced on you. And you can come back to what Pierre is going in here. Who is forcing? A lot of these companies that will take from an HR company, how to do the particular form, or there's a massive company that they buy the software from, and the software is provided with a form. And probably somewhere in a board meeting, the CEO thought that this was the right thing to do, the progressive thing to do, on the right side of history, that they have to put these forms out there. And if they don't, they're being political, and they want to make everyone a safe and equal environment. And so people have to follow in these particular forms. There's no choice otherwise, because it won't allow for disobedience. Or it doesn't, it wouldn't not allow that. So then the company buys it. And either the HR person feels either they are obeying or commanding, right? So they have to fall into this particular worldview. And they don't know whether or not. So then the person signing up, some people are going to feel like, okay, this is amazing, this is the right thing, but it leaves out a lot of other people who are disobedient, who have no reason to put that their 3-month-old daughter is a they be, or pansexual, or is a Gaelic, transsexual, native indigenous person who speaks, all of these bizarre languages, and her preferences, or they preferences, right? There's these language games that are forced on you, but who is doing it, right? Sometimes it's not the person that you meet at the front desk, right? They're not buying the software, right? So it is kind of this homogenized, amorphous blob. And that's, the pronouns thing is a big part of this sort of command and obey. And coming off of the U.S. men's hockey team thing, we find these pronouns parts everywhere. Resumes, LinkedIn, forms, when you go to, you find them in some churches, which is an abomination. You find them in all these particular areas, and people are forced to follow it. And sometimes the business owners, I'm sure, don't want to do it, some of them, because it is the only software maybe that they are able to get, right? Maybe they can only pick from 5 particular softwares that they can use for their business, and each of them has these forms. So it is, this amorphous blob, and that is what Pierre Manent is discussing in Natural Law and Human Rights. And I went pretty long in this video. I'll probably do a few more from here. This book it's flooring me. These videos will get better from here, but I appreciate you watching. I'll do some more videos. Again, Natural Law and Human Rights Toward a Recovery of Practical Reason by Pierre Manent. Is fantastic. It's for me, as I said earlier, it is the most profound piece of political work, and a profound piece of work that helps you understand worldviews and colors of world that I've read since Conflict of Visions. So again, if you like this, please like and subscribe. If you want some more, go to my site, jimclair.com. It's hosted over on Substack. And subscribe. I'd love to see you there, and I'll see you soon.